Hello, everyone. My name is Mahara Wayman, and I'd like to welcome you to my Women of Courage series. I'm really excited because today I'm going to chat with a lady named Deb, and she's going to share some great insights with us. Deb, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Deb Martens, and I originally am from the United States, born and raised in Southern California, and I immigrated to Canada almost 17 years ago. Um, I have a diverse background, primarily in healthcare of some sort, everything from being a trainer educator for a hospital stateside in their mental health units, as well as now I've kind of married my past career to a spiritual journey in my life, and I'm a spiritual health practitioner for a long-term care facility in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Wow, that's so interesting. Well, as you all know, our series is about courage. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing with us what your definition of courage is.
Mm. So I have to right off the hop say I had to borrow a definition that really resonates with me. So to quote one of my favorite speakers and researchers, Brene Brown, um, she says, loving ourselves through the process of owning our story is the bravest thing we will ever do. So then to expand on that, I feel like this bravery or courage comes through a process of deep exploration, a willingness for me to be open with myself and eventually others, and holding a posture of humility.
I love that. So keeping that in mind, Deb, how would you describe your relationship with this act of bravery, of learning yourself with through humility? What's your
Mhm.
relationship like?
So I often look at life as a metaphor. I feel like I'm a living river. And I feel like courage or bravery, it's the banks of the river. And so sometimes my relationship ebbs and flows with the current. And is, if there's strong winds or a storm brewing, then the river slams up against the banks. But there's this deep knowing that the banks are still there, and that there's trust, and that the banks are going to guide me and protect me. And other times when it's just quiet and calm, my life river just laps up against the banks or goes alongside. And so then it's much more serene.
I think it's really interesting that you have welcomed this idea of movement and flexibility in this journey of courage,
Mhm.
because as you were describing the banks and the river, I really felt it. I could really see it. And it actually felt very calming. Even when you described it being forceful and there's a storm and the fact that there are banks there,
Mhm.
pretty powerful visual. Thank you for sharing.
For
So
sure.
would you mind sharing also something that you feel has been a very courageous experience on your part?
So, I've given this some thought, and at first I was like, I don't even know how to answer this question because without putting judgment for the good or the bad, if somebody wanted to use judgment vocabulary, I've been called to many acts of courage throughout my life. However, I think the overarching act of courage in the more recent past, in the last few years, that I can think of is I wrote my master's thesis and it was entitled Embracing Joy in the Midst of Life. And then the subtitle was The Capacity of Noticing Joy and Embracing It Through Trauma. And in that, I focused on the themes of self compassion, resilience, faith and spirituality, hope and gratitude. And I had the honor of using a research methodology called autoethnography. So again, it's kind of like this whole current visual that I often use. And so I was able to look at my own life and also look through the lens of others that I had the privilege of interviewing, other women, and had this ebb and flow within my thesis of writing our narratives of noticing and embracing joy in the midst of our lives, and specifically through traumatic events.
Wow. Okay, so how did doing that change your life?
I think it's just been a culmination of self-work at a really deep level. It's brought me through journeys of forgiveness and brought me to a real sincere place of transparency for myself and for others. It's given me a solid foundation now at this stage in my life, middle age, if you want to call it, and the ability and the invitation to be able to walk alongside specifically other women's lives when I'm invited into that space. I now have this solid foundation to be able to walk with them in whatever their trials, their traumas might be, and hopefully invite them to even just notice that joy is a possibility.
I just love that. I have to ask, I'm really curious. When you think back, you mentioned middle age, we're of the same age. When you think back 10, 20, 30 years ago,
Mhm.
ever see yourself being in this position where you could say with total honesty and empathy that you are able to do what you're doing today?
Oh, I'd say, yeah, even as recent as 10 years ago, I don't think that I would have been able to look into the future. If somebody had told me that I'd be doing spiritual health work, wellness coaching, individual mentoring, walking by the side of these beautiful, beautiful women in this capacity, no, I don't think so. It's been quite a healing journey, quite an exploration. Um, and I didn't have the confidence at that point. I needed to be able to work through these things to be able to have the confidence that I now have.
I like that you said the word confidence because it's not often used, but the truth is, especially when you're dealing with self-exploration, anything that you do that takes courage, and you surpass, you manage to do it, you jump over the hurdle, you must automatically have this innate confidence level boost
Mhm.
because you've done it.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a
Absolutely.
little bit more about what that feels like? This, oh, I can do that.
Yeah. You know, now I can say that I grew up with a mother who was strong. However, growing up, I didn't experience that. I would have experienced saying that, I would have articulated that my mom was actually a weak person because of some of the abusive things that we had to endure. Um, Now, at this time in my life, I can look back on my childhood, my growing up, and my mom's legacy of realizing she did have a lot of strength and resilience, and she did the very best that she could. So, those were the stepping stones of building my confidence and my resiliency to get to this point.
Would you say now that you think your mom had courage?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that she passed it to me in her own way. Absolutely.
I think that's what's so interesting about these conversations is that, first of all, courage is different to everyone. We all have different journeys and different trials and tribulations. And the fact that you could make that statement in the middle of your life that my mom passed on her courage. It's
Mm,
that's quite profound. I'm so glad that you found it.
mm,
I'm glad that you found that because the relationships that we have with our parents, wow, they are so paramount in shaping the type of life that we're going to have. And I appreciate that. I like listening to you talk about the growth that you've experienced with that because, the relationship we have with our mothers especially is so precious,
mm-hmm.
albeit so challenging for all these different reasons, right?
Absolutely.
Um, so I have one last question. Well, truthfully, I could chat with you all day, right? Because I'm loving this conversation. But I'm curious, first of all, is this the first time that you've really thought of yourself as being courageous? And secondly, um, how often does the word or does the phrase "I am courageous" figure into your day, if at all?
Mm, mm. Um, I think I've certainly embraced owning the courage that now is in my life much more in the last 5 years or so. Um, the realization that the actual working through my thesis was an act of courage in and of itself. I would say that was a aha for me as I was thinking about our conversation. That direct connection, I hadn't put those dots together before. And so I have a deep gratitude being invited into this conversation, which spurred me into a sacred place of reflection to realize that that became kind of this overarching part of my life in the last 5 years in my master's work, as far as speaking my truth and also being the voice of others who shared their truth with me was very courageous. Um, and in my daily life, I don't know how often it's on a conscious level, but I think it's just this thread in the tapestry of my life that I know now that courage exists through having a husband who has a terminal illness, a sister who has developmental disability, and I'm her guardian, the spiritual health work that I am privileged to do with residents who have dementia, and even the wellness coaching. I i am given this amazing beautiful gift to stand courageous in my own life and to stand courageously for others. And so it's definitely there, and I thank you for the invitation to bring it to my conscious being.
Deb, no thanks needed. This has been an amazing conversation, and I just love listening to all of these women be so honest and have this honest conversation with themselves. I think I loved your use of language when you said it's woven in the tapestry of my life. That's
Mhm.
very powerful. And how wonderful to know that whatever our definition of courage is, if we have a definition, it's there. If we can
Abs-
define it, it's already there, whether we know that we're tapping into it or not. I think that's a really exciting thing about connection and conversation, which is why I'm doing this, because once we connect the dots, as you said earlier, it's a whole new realization of what we're capable of,
mhm,
right? Because
mhm.
life doesn't stop throwing us challenges. Just because
Yeah.
we made it the hair doesn't mean that we're not going to get a challenge here.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
really, really powerful, really nice. Deb, thank you so much for being so open and so honest with us today. It's been a pleasure discussing your definition of courage, and I look
Mm.
forward to more conversations with you. For those of you that have never joined us before, my name is Mahara Wayman. Please feel free to leave some comments. My website is mindfulnesswithmahara.com. I almost forgot it. Look, it's right there behind me. Have a fabulous day, everyone. Until next time. Bye-bye.